All right, so today we're going to take a look at the social cognitive perspective. This perspective was introduced by Albert Bandura, and we know Albert Bandura for his famous Bobo doll experiment that we talked about in the learning unit. So he is a behaviorist. However, like behavioral perspective theorists, the social cognitive theorists believe we learn many of our behaviors either through conditioning or by observing others and modeling our behavior after theirs. That's the social part. They also emphasize the importance of the mental piece, what we think about our situations and how that affects our behavior. That's the cognitive part. So the social cognitive theorist focuses on how we and our environment interact. Bandura called the process of interacting with our environment reciprocal determinism. So he believed that these three things, personal determinants, behavioral determinants, and environmental determinants, all interact and influence our experience of our environment around us. So the first one is that people choose different environments if you're looking at the environmental determinants. You'll choose the college you'll attend, the music you like to listen to, the TV shows you like to watch, the friends you choose to hang out with. They're all part of your environment, and you have chosen to be a part of that. So you choose your environment, and then it shapes you. Our personalities shape how we interact and react to events. So anxious people, for example, are attuned to potentially threatening events. They perceive the world as threatening, and they might even react accordingly. Our personalities help create situations to which we react. If we expect someone to be angry with us, we may give that person a cold shoulder and might touch off the very anger that we expected to see. So behavior tends to emerge from the interplay of external and internal influences. It's just like a threatening environment can turn one person into a hero and another into a scoundrel or a villain. So we take a look at how these three factors, our environment, our personality, and our behavior, all affect our experience and affect our personality. All right. One of the other things that is talked about in this particular section is looking at how we interact with our environment. Social cognitive psychologists emphasize our sense of personal control. So, personal control is our sense of controlling our environment rather than feeling helpless. Internal locus of control is the perception that one controls one's own fate. So ask yourself, do you believe that your life is beyond your control? That the world is run by a few powerful people? That getting a good job depends mainly on being at the right place at the right time? Or do you more strongly believe that what happens to you is of your own doing? That the average person can influence decisions? That being successful is a matter of hard work and not luck? Well, what I did is I just described these two different terms, the internal locus of control and the external locus of control. Internals, as we describe them, have the perception that they do control their own fate or destiny. Externals have the perception that it's beyond their control, that chance or outside factors will determine their fate. Learned helplessness is the hopelessness and passive resignation that an animal or human learns when they're unable to avoid repeated aversive events. Remember, aversive means unpleasant. So when we talk about learned helplessness, they oftentimes use this very sad example of an experiment that was conducted. What you see is a dog that's in a cage that's separated by a partition. The dog can get back and forth to either side of the kennel. What they do is they flash a light and they electrify half of the kennel. Well, the dog learns very quickly when it notices the light and gets electrified that if it's on one half, it'll get shocked. If it goes to the other side, it can avoid the shock. There's a little bit of a delay between the light flashing and the kennel getting electrocuted on half of it. So the dog very quickly sees the light, learns to go to the safe side and avoid getting shocked. After they've trained the dog, really classically conditioned the dog by responding to the once neutral light, by jumping to the side where there is no shock, what they then do is they flash the light in the kennel and they electrify the whole entire kennel, the whole cage. And right away the dog jumps around trying to find a safe part of the kennel to avoid getting shocked. But over time, after repeated unpleasant events, which means repeatedly getting shocked, the dog would see the light and it would lay down because it knew no matter what it did, it was going to get shocked. This is an example of learned helplessness. Sometimes I see this with students in school. The repeated adverse events are bad grades. Eventually, after getting bad grade after bad grade after bad grade, no matter what they did, what they tried, studying, getting help, asking questions, if they still end up not doing very well, they just throw the towel in. They think, why even bother? And they just give up. In a worst case scenario, learned helplessness can lead to depression and suicide, where a person believes no matter what they do, their life isn't worth living. So it can have very serious consequences. All right, so getting off of that very sad last example, let's talk about Martin Seligman and positive psychology. Martin Seligman has been the American Psychological Association president for the last decade. And he introduced a new movement in psychology that's really gaining strength and momentum. Positive psychology does share with humanistic psychology a very strong interest in human fulfillment, but they take a much more scientific approach than Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers did. So this is the scientific study of optimal human functioning, aiming to discover and promote strengths and virtues that enable individuals and communities to thrive. All right. Within positive psychology and social learning theory, we look at the spotlight effect. Sometimes what we do is we overestimate other people's noticing and evaluating either our appearance, our performance, or our mistakes, presumably as if we are in a spotlight. I know that I've had this happen to me, especially as a teacher. I'm in the front of the classroom and I'm lecturing and I'm giving demonstrations. And sometimes I'm really sensitive to the fact that people are noticing certain mistakes that I might have made. And really, in all actuality, kids might not even have the slightest clue. Sometimes you feel that way when you are with your friends. You feel as if they're evaluating your appearance, your performance, they're noticing your mistakes. But in all actuality, you're your own worst critic. There's a section in the book that looks at self-esteem, which is one's feeling of high or low self-worth. Researchers shows the best boost of self-esteem would actually be by helping kids meet challenges, not rewarding them despite their failures. We talked about this a little bit earlier when we talked about the inferiority complex by Alfred Adler. And how sometimes it's okay to fail, because that's when we are challenged and we learn the most about ourselves. And when we do overcome obstacles, it's the greatest feeling. It boosts our self-esteem. All right. The self-serving bias is a readiness to perceive oneself favorably. What they find that people actually accept more responsibility for good deeds than for bad, for successes than for failures. We're way more apt to, accept responsibility when good things happen, but what do we do when bad things happen? We shift the blame onto someone else. We do actually tend to see ourselves as better than average. It's kind of the example of overconfidence that we've talked about it before in the past. All right, that's it.